Emmy-winning show Adolescence offers more than great acting and cinematography. What makes Adolescence so powerful is the angle of the story. Most of us are disturbed by the idea of a 13-year-old boy committing murder. People's instinct is to find a very straightforward explanation for it. Maybe the boy's from an abusive household. Maybe he's a psychopath. Or maybe he grew up in a troubled neighborhood exposed to violence. But Jamie Miller is none of the above. He's just a regular teenager from a seemingly normal family living a seemingly normal life. So, what made him capable of murder? The producer of Adolescence, Stephen Graham, said, "We wanted you to look at this family and think, my God, this could be happening to us." Adolescence paints us a picture of the perfect storm that pushed 13-year-old Jamie to murder his fellow classmate, with each episode giving us a glimpse into the contributing factors. This show is a slow burn, but it cuts deep. Now let's unpack this perfect storm and answer the heavy questions. Who failed Jamie? What created Jamie? On a quiet morning, police raided Jamie's home, turning the house into complete chaos. Jamie Miller was arrested on suspicion of murder. The lanky boy was so scared he peed himself. Like Jamie's family, many viewers thought Jamie was innocent at first, but most people missed the early hints in Jamie's body language. According to criminal psychology experts, face palming indicates shame and denial. By covering his eyes for a split second, Jamie escaped the horrifying reality that he wasn't ready to face. And having his hands on the top of his head shows shock and disbelief. This is the body language of someone who realized they messed up big time. It's saying, "What have I done? How am I in this situation?" Jamie's parents were also very shocked, but a key difference is their body language showed confusion, not shame. They were indignant about the unwarranted police raid, walking with arms open and raised mid-air. This open gesture indicates they had nothing to hide. They were offended by how aggressive the police were and they were not overly cooperative. These are reactions commonly seen in people who are innocent. At the police station, Jamie chose his father Eddie as his appropriate adult, which is someone who will be present with the minor during police interview. The shouting and pounding on the doors from other detainees echoed in the hallway, adding to Jamie's distress. He was very uneasy when the nurse took his blood since he's scared of needles. It's hard to fathom how this squeamish boy who couldn't even handle needles took another person's life with a kitchen knife. The police requested a strip search where Jamie was required to take off all his clothes for the police to collect evidence. This really triggered Eddie's protective instincts. He argued with the police, repeatedly reminding them that Jamie was only 13. As Eddie became increasingly emotional, Jamie stepped in and said, "Dad is fine," and agreed to the strip search. We can see that Jamie and his dad cared a lot about each other. Jamie de-escalated the heated argument to protect his dad from getting in trouble with police. And from the zoomed-in shot of Eddie's expression, we can see how painful it was for him that he couldn't protect his son from this humiliating situation. For a parent, this is a very helpless and heartbreaking moment. But the most painful moment had yet to come. Eddie thought his son was innocent this whole time until he saw the security camera footage at the police interview. In the video, Jamie and his classmate Katie seemed to be having an argument. The argument soon became physical, and after being pushed to the floor by Katie, Jamie lost it. He chased Katie down as she was walking away and stabbed her multiple times. After seeing this, there's a noticeable change in Eddie's body language. His hand was first covering his mouth, then it moved to his face. This shows his emotion went from shock to shame. He couldn't look at Jamie for a while, but eventually, with a little hesitance, Eddie put his son in his arms. Now remember this moment, and we'll find out later why this hug was so important, but it came too late. Seeing Jamie's school gives us the first glimpse into what went wrong for Jamie. The police detectives went to Jamie's school hoping to locate the knife that Jamie used to kill Katie. Immediately, we see some obvious problems that are common in the British public school system. Jamie's school was chaotic, overcrowded, and understaffed. Teachers were scrambling trying to keep students in order and often resorted to scolding them. Some teachers tried to facilitate the police investigation by asking students to provide information, but they clearly couldn't get through to the students, especially when they approached Jade, who was the best friend of the victim. Jade was in the depth of grief, and if you're familiar with the 5 stages of grief, Jade was experiencing a lot of anger. She refused to work with the police because she didn't trust their intentions. She felt like they were blaming the victim for bullying Jamie. And she took her anger out on Jamie's close friend, Ryan, beating him up and calling him a murderer. The only person Jade felt comfortable confiding in was Miss Bailey. But when Jade opened up about her feelings, Miss Bailey suggested her to speak to a therapist. This turned Jade further away, leaving her feeling even more hurt and lonely.
Not another shrink.
No, it's not a shrink. It's just something for you to
fuck
talk
that.
to. Please, Jade.
Are you serious?
No, you can't go back to class. You know you can't. Come on, Jade, darling, stay with me.
What Jade went through reflects the school's incompetence in helping students with crisis management. Teachers like Miss Bailey were well-meaning but tone-deaf. They wanted to help, but they didn't know how to react to students' distress. Jade described Katie as the only one who actually thought she was okay. Jade didn't just lose a best friend, she lost her entire support system. What she needed was simply someone to hold space for her grief, someone who could listen and be a shoulder to cry on. Seeing a therapist would certainly help, but Jade was simply not there yet, and it probably felt more like a rejection to her, that Miss Bailey thought there was something wrong with her, so she wanted to send her to a shrink. Although we don't know exactly what Jamie went through, we can infer that similar to Jade, Jamie struggled silently from being bullied at school. Not that this in any way justifies his actions, but maybe it would have made a difference if someone from his school was equipped to help him navigate this crisis. But the reality is that everyone around Jamie was taken by surprise, as if he became a murderer overnight. No one even noticed anything was off with Jamie until it was too late. But we have yet to discuss the biggest problem with Jamie's school. After spending the entire day there, both detectives were very fed up because the school reminded them of a holding cell, somewhere disturbingly familiar to them. The school didn't seem like a stimulating learning environment. It was just a facility to hold teenagers so their parents could go to work and contribute to the economy. The history teacher, Mr. Malik, showed up late to class and played videos for students instead of actually teaching. When Detective Bascom approached him to ask questions about Jamie, we can see that Mr. Malik clearly could not care less.
I wouldn't know, you know? When these kids are fucking impossible, I mean, what am I supposed to do?
The sad thing is, history was Jamie's favorite subject. He told his lawyer he liked the Industrial Revolution, and his favorite figure from that period was Bruno, a visionary engineer. If Mr. Malik had paid more attention to Jamie's appreciation for history, could that have made a difference? I think Detective Frank gave us the answer. She went to a similar school as Jamie when she was young, and she said the reason she survived was because she had a really good art teacher.
Nice. All kids really need is one thing that makes them feel okay about themselves, mate. That's it.
What Detective Frank said here is precisely how Jamie was failed by his school. He didn't have the one thing that made him feel okay about himself, the one thing that could boost his confidence and self-worth. When Jamie was at the police station, the people that interacted with him, police officers, nurses, and his lawyer, they all called him a smart kid. Maybe history could have been his one thing. Maybe a history teacher who cared could have helped Jamie realize his potential instead of being destroyed by incel culture. This leads us to the next topic, how the digital ecosystem failed Jamie. At Jamie's school, we learned that Jamie was cyberbullied by Katie. She used emojis in her Instagram comments to insinuate that Jamie was an incel, involuntary celibate. An incel is someone who wants to be in a romantic and sexual relationship but feels unable to find a partner because they think they're considered undesirable in the dating market. The origin of involuntary celibacy is actually completely harmless. It started as a website created by university student Alana in 1997 to document her struggles with dating. Her experience resonated with many people, and her website became an online support group for this community. Alana eventually found a partner and left the website in the hands of other members. This was when the online hub took a dark turn. It became a forum for sexually frustrated men who directed their anger at women. The incel culture thinks there's an 80-20 rule. 80% of women are attracted to 20% of men. They chastise women for being sexually selective and creating a social hierarchy based solely on looks and status. At 13 years old, many teens experience puberty and start to develop romantic and sexual interests, but they're still young and impressionable. The incel culture is harmful, especially for youth, because it perpetuates a scarcity mindset where women are objectified as scarce resource that men compete for. And scarcity mindset leads to fear. What Jamie was scared of was not being single at 13, but being single forever. He was scared that there was something intrinsically wrong with him that makes him unworthy of love. In his conversation with the psychologist who was hired to do an independent evaluation for the judge, Jamie mentioned multiple times that he thought he was ugly, that he wasn't attractive to girls, and he felt that was the reason Katie bullied him. This belief is likely influenced by the incel ideology of an appearance-based hierarchy. This hierarchy categorizes men and women into 3 tiers based on physical attractiveness. Chads refer to men in the highest tier with alpha status, and incels are not surprisingly in the bottom tier. And this is often considered immutable, meaning there's no hope for upward mobility for incels, because this hierarchy is largely based on genetics, and genetics cannot be changed. This explains the intensity of Jamie's fear of being an incel. It's a permanent identity that marks a doomed future. In Jamie's school, we also see the prevalence of misogyny and dehumanization of women. Before Katie was murdered, she was slut-shamed. A boy she liked asked her for a topless picture and then leaked the picture to the rest of the class. Jamie's response to this was,
"No one will send him any of her pictures because he wasn't careful with the one he got. The twat."
Katie's privacy and dignity were violated, but Jamie's concern was not being able to get more inappropriate pictures from girls. What's even more messed up is that Jamie saw Katie's tarnished reputation as an opportunity to ask her out.
Because everyone was calling her a slag, or flat or whatever, so I thought when she was like that weak, she might like me.
Jamie was not attracted to Katie. He asked her out because he wanted to feel chosen and validated by a female. Katie was simply someone Jamie thought was within his league, someone who could prove him worthy. And when a female doesn't validate Jamie, this is when things go very wrong. Rejection from a female was the trigger that made Jamie hysterical.
Come on.
Don't you even like me a bit? What did you think about me then? Don't you go fucking telling everyone I did it! Don't you dare!
Whoa, come on.
And it didn't help that the psychologist, Bryony, had a very specific job. Her responsibility was to advise the judge whether Jamie could be held legally responsible for his actions. And in order to do that, she had to ask challenging questions to understand Jamie's mindset. Bryony's job was not to provide therapy or to soothe Jamie's emotions, so her withholding simple validations like telling Jamie he's not ugly might seem cruel to do to a teenager, but this is her keeping professional boundaries and neutrality. Jamie's temper tantrums give us a glimpse into his violent tendencies. When he felt challenged or rejected by a woman, his defense mechanism was to terrorize and humiliate her. Bryony tapped into Jamie's deepest fear when she asked about the incel-related emojis in Katie's comment. Jamie became defensive. He picked on a very trivial slip-up Bryony made, calling Instagram Facebook, and he tried to get under her skin by poking at her own fears.
You look a bit red. Did I scare you when I shouted? How embarrassing is that? Getting scared of a 13-year-old.
Jamie wanted to establish power over Bryony by putting her down and showing contempt, but this was all just his desperate attempt to mask his shame and insecurities. Incel culture is just a small tip of the dark side of the digital ecosystem. It's hard for parents and teachers to shield children from toxic online influence because they might not even have caught on to it. We could see this generational gap through Detective Bascom. He couldn't see how a few simple emojis, or symbols as he called them, could be as bad as cyberbullying. His son, who attended Jamie's school, had to teach him that emojis can convey complex messages.
You text hearts, right? What color?
Red.
Means love. Purple, horny. Yellow, I'm interested. Are you interested? Pink, I'm interested, but not in sex.
Gen Z and Gen Alpha kids are digital natives. They get the nuances of online content, and this makes them more susceptible to the influence of social media. In Jamie's case, Instagram was weaponized for bullying. Before the age of social media, bullying was typically limited to a small group of people who knew each other personally, but cyberbullying can be more public and anonymous. So Katie wasn't the only perpetrator. Everyone who liked her Instagram comment was also part of the bullying. This might not sound like a big deal because, after all, Jamie wasn't a public figure, so the cyberbullying at most will only be within his school. But the problem is, for a 13-year-old, school feels like the entire world. This is because the teenage brain undergoes developmental changes. The reward-seeking limbic system matures faster than the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for rational thinking and inhibition. This, combined with puberty hormones, leads to heightened social sensitivity. This means validation and rejection from peers feel much more intense for teenagers than for adults. From an evolutionary standpoint, social sensitivity was preserved in our genetics because it served as a critical survival mechanism. In our hunter and gatherer days, being banished from the band was a death sentence. It meant starving to death or being eaten by large carnivores. This is obviously no longer the case for modern humans, but our brains still operate with some primitive wiring. Pure rejection certainly hurts, but the most painful rejection for Jamie probably came from his father. Now on to the final piece of the puzzle, how Jamie's parents failed him. 1 year after Jamie's arrest, his family continued to struggle with the aftermath. Their nosy neighbor passed judgmental looks, and some kids in their neighborhood vandalized the family's van. They spray-painted nuns, a derogatory term in British slang for a sex offender. Jamie's family is like any regular family, far from perfect, but not as bad as dysfunctional. The vandalism incident resurfaced an ongoing argument between Jamie's parents. Jamie's father, Eddie, didn't like his wife's idea of moving to Liverpool to escape harassment. He thought it would be too disruptive to Jamie's sister's life. Eddie had a temper and was not the most emotionally available parent, but there's no denying that he tried his best to do right by his children. He worked long hours as a plumber to provide for his family, and he made sure to never hit his children even though Eddie himself grew up getting beaten by his dad. So Eddie did manage to break generational trauma in ways he was able to. The family went on a drive to the hardware store to pick up paint for repainting their van. They could have a good laugh and feel a sense of normalcy within the safe confines of the van, but out in the real world, things quickly took a downturn yet again. An employee at the hardware store recognized Eddie and started to discuss Jamie's case. The disturbing details put Eddie in a bad headspace, and the last straw was when Eddie saw the teenager who vandalized his van in the parking lot. In a fit of rage, Eddie poured the paint he just bought all over the van, leaving his wife and daughter terrified. We can see a parallel in the way Eddie and Jamie deal with humiliation. Eddie covered the slur graffiti, but in doing so, he destroyed his van. Jamie was able to stop Katie from calling him an incel, but he did so by taking her life. They both made the damage worse with their brute force and self-destructive attempts to hide their problems, as if when you can't see or hear the insult, it must not be true. This maladaptive coping strategy was passed down from Eddie to his son. Avoidance, denial, combined with impulsivity and aggression, ultimately led Jamie down a tragic path. On the drive home, Eddie got Jamie's phone call from prison to wish him happy birthday. Jamie also delivered some heavy news. He's decided to plead guilty. Jamie only trusted Eddie with this information. When he found out that his mom and sister were also on the call, he sounded noticeably uncomfortable, as if their presence was too intrusive. Jamie idolized his dad, which is why he wanted to tell Eddie his plea as a way to own up to his mistake and to apologize. Jamie's decision to plead guilty gave his parents closure, but it also forced them to confront their guilt. Jamie's mom regretted not paying more attention to Jamie when he was often up late on his computer, and Eddie reflected on a time when he took Jamie to soccer practice. Jamie was very bad at soccer and was sidelined to play as goalie. He was so bad that the other dads at the practice were laughing at him. Eddie could feel Jamie looking at him seeking help, but...
And I couldn't look at him, man. I couldn't look at me, homeboy.
Jamie thought this meant his dad was ashamed of him, but really, Eddie was just avoidant and wasn't able to deal with embarrassment and disappointment in a healthy way. Eddie embodies many stereotypical masculinity traits, loving all sports, being a provider and a protector for his family. It's natural for him to want to connect with his son over sports, and it's understandable that he was disappointed when that failed. But children are not an extension of their parents. As a parent, Eddie failed to give his son the reassurance of unconditional love, the reassurance that Jamie is loved and accepted even if he's horrible at sports. And as a result, Jamie thinks his worth and manhood are conditional upon his athletic abilities. This was a big contributor to Jamie's low self-esteem. There's research showing that children often internalize their parents' neglect and emotional failings as personal faults. In other words, Jamie wouldn't blame his dad for failing to support him at soccer practice. Instead, he would think that it was his fault that he was bad at soccer and embarrass his dad. Children adopt this self-blame rationale because they need to rely on their parents for survival and safety, and they didn't have the capacity yet to understand adult flaws. So the only way children can make sense of being mistreated is to convince themselves that they're the problem and they're not enough. If you still remember this hug we discussed earlier in the video, this hug was important for Jamie because it happened after Eddie discovered that his son had committed murder. This shows Jamie unconditional love. Through this hug, Eddie is telling Jamie, "You made a big mistake, son, but we'll face this together." But this hug came too late. If Eddie was able to give Jamie a hug at soccer practice, or when Jamie was being bullied at school, maybe Jamie wouldn't have such a fragile ego. Insults only provoke us when a small part of us fears they might be true. If Jamie knew his worth, I don't think he would have resorted to committing murder, since his action was driven more by fear than by hate. It's often tempting to point fingers to the parents when a child commits a heinous crime. People often ask, what kind of parents would raise a child like that? But the question to ask isn't should they have done better, but could they have done better? Even though Jamie's parents loved their kids, they were not equipped to give Jamie the support he needed when he needed it.
I was a good mom.
You was.
I'm a good mom. You're a good dad, a great dad. But we made them.
Luckily, Jamie's sister helped alleviate a lot of her parents' guilt. On top of missing her brother, Jamie's sister was also facing bullying at school for Jamie's crime, but she was able to handle this with grace and courage beyond her years.
We can't move. It's Jamie. Jamie's ours.
Jamie's sister decided against moving to Liverpool because she understood that running away from problems could only bring temporary relief. She decided to carry her brother's mistakes with her and face the consequences. Jamie's family didn't lose him to death, but they also had to navigate through grief. They grieved Jamie's innocence and the loss of their family dynamics before Jamie's crime. But the family was able to lean on each other and reconcile with their grief and guilt, ultimately reaching a point of acceptance. Adolescence is not based on a single true story or one specific crime. It's inspired by the rise in knife-related crimes among young boys in the UK. There's no dramatic action scenes, no cliffhangers, but it does something more impactful. It explores the complexity of different social issues that contribute to youth violence. Jamie was by no means a stereotypical at-risk teen, which makes an even stronger case for the importance of the factors affecting teenagers' mental health: the school system, online activities, and family dynamics. Small things can snowball into an avalanche, and every snowflake in the avalanche should feel responsible.